Good morning, everybody. As the continuous of the transplant series, today I am presenting biliary complications. So, I will cover on these outlines. So, first, coming to biliary complication is the most common complication in a transplant setting. It constitutes around 10 to 1/4, and is called as Achilles heel because of high frequency, requiring long-term repeated treatment, and have a poor impact on the graft as well as the patient survival, and mortality can happen up to 10% of the cases. So this is the spectrum, which includes anastomotic stricture, non-anastomotic stricture, bilioma, bile leak, stones, sludge or clots, biliary cast syndrome, hemobilia, mucocele. So this is whole spectrums, of which the stricture and leak constitute the majority, 75% of post-transplant biliary complications. So how they happen? You can see this is the timeline we have shown. The initially from the day of surgery, immediately we can have a bile leak. Over the period of second, third weeks, the strictures components has developed. SOD you can able to feel in case of third months or onwards, and this stricture can progress beyond 8 months, also can go up to years together. And the less common causes we told of biliolith, bile cast syndrome, all they comes little later. So this is when a patient comes with a dysfunction, the biliary complication suggested. So this is the timeline, helps likely the first possibility for considering the cause for his problem. So mostly ours is a LDLT center, the global data mostly on the DDLT. So how we see the biliary complications? You can see the biliary complications overall is more, leaks happens to be more, strictures also happens to be more. And why this happens? Because we have a multiple duct grafts to be used. Duct caliber is very small, so difficulty in anastomosis is there. The ducts are remotely located, in contrast to the DDLT, where DDLT the duct anastomosis is quite in the CBD or the distal part, and have a manipulation leading to the difficulties in the vascular supply restoration. And the twisted stricture, because of the preferential growth of the liver, the right lobe or left lobe grows, that makes kinking, angulations and misalignments. So before considering the biliary complication, we should think of the vascular supply. You can see closely the CBD and the hepatic artery supply, they goes close and parallel to parallel. So when any anastomosis happen, the supply also affected is atrial, and also it contributes to a major part. So we can see the CBD is mainly supplied by a plexus with 3 o'clock artery, 9 o'clock arteries, which are the branches of GD in mostly cases, and some in 38% cases is from the right hepatic branches, and they go to the hilar area as a plexus forming called as periductal plexus. So this is here the GDA, right hepatic artery, and the 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and important is the caudate lobe supply, which is totally difficult and mostly manipulated in case of the hilar dissections. So when you go for this partial liver graft, the majority part of the duct has been remain with the donor. So that is why you have to be affected in the area of right hepatic or left hepatic arteries, the hilar plates. Hence you has risk for the having biliary injuries. So why and how the ducts in biliary is different from the DDLT? You can see this is anatomy for the normal biliary structures. When you go for a DDLT, it is quite below. It can be a common hepatic duct, where the easier is the anastomosis, less disturbance into the vascular complications. When you go to the left lobe graft, it is mostly a single duct anastomosis, which is often to be large caliber because of the left main duct is there. When you consider right duct, then you have to think of anastomosis 1:1 or 2:1 or 2:2. So this is a 2:1 because two ducts are there, being a common trunk, getting anastomosed. But again, if it is white up, it all depends upon the liver plan to be resected from the donor as per the anatomy. So that is why when you go to the distal part, you get more thinner ducts, more peripheral ducts for the anastomosis. So this is the variation in the ducts. Hence, as you have seen in the previous pictures, if we are putting here the anastomos cut for the graft, right graft here, or the left lobe graft here. So these are the various anatomies leading to the difficulties in planning the surgery. So hence before surgery also needed to reconfirm and the plan the procedures, because as we see in the previous classifications, the A1, B and C, D, the complication rates are increasing. You can see the E and F, it is nearly 100%. If you are dealing with this type of anastomosis, D, so we need a duct anatomy clear before the transplant plan, and here that helps in guiding the treatment plans. The next important part which involved is the caudate lobe. Caudate lobe is often manipulated during the surgery, and if the caudate lobe has been taken on the recipient side, then you have to do the cut section for the bile ducts either here, or it is here, or it is going behind. So you have to do a cut here, you have to do cut here. So here the duct is long course, we need to know. Second, the vascular anatomy is totally unique and is separate. So hence the caudate lobe often happens to be affected and has a major implication on the biliary complications. So caudate lobe involvement causes the most commonly a biliary leak problems. So this is a study from the India where they have done around 500 transplants, where they have shown that the crossover is called as left to right or right to left. So these crossovers, the bile leak can happen the donor 0.8%, the recipient is 2.2%, and this is better than the all international regimens where this was 10 to 25% as the bile leaks. So when you consider biliary complications, we have to see the following headings: the technical parts, that is whether we have done excessive dissection of the periductal tissue, electrocutation of the duct stump because of bleeding, tension at the duct site, ducts having small caliber, multiple number of drugs, and T-tube placement, which is now less often practiced. Then as we have discussed, we have to think of whether it is a LDLT or a DDLT. If it is DDLT, then you have to know it is brain dead or cardiac donor, because cardiac donor has high risk of developing strictures, and if a urgency, in case of ALF, is likely to have biliary complications. Then comes to the ischemic components, that is heart stenosis or ischemic reperfusion injury. These are components for developing a non-anastomotic strictures. Then immunological, if repeated ACR, that is acute rejections, or a development of or because of ABO incomplete transplant, biliary complications often increase. CMV is a silent smoldering cause for the biliary complications, and has been shown that if we take elderly donors, particularly DDLT setting, if a recipient is sick with a high MELD or a pre-transplant diagnosis is cholestatic liver, they have a little bit chance more for rapid developing biliary complications after the transplant. So these are the few things we have to consider when analyzing the patient for the post-transplant biliary complications. So most common and the first complication is to be happening the bile leak. The bile leak can happen from the anastomotic site, 60 duct remnants, T-tube tracts, or from the cut surface. If this leak is less than 1 millimeter, it is small and most often happen at the anastomotic site, and it can be because of technical or a hat. But when it is long, that is more than 1 millimeter, is because of T-tube removal, because of ischemia. And very often the stricture progress from the bile leak site. So when we should suspect a bile leak in a transplant patient, the abdominal drain which shows a biliary drainage, they develop sepsis. In ultrasound we found having bilioma, or you suspect clinically as a cholangitis. Sometimes they develop peritonitis. So if you suspect, how to diagnose? The clinically, as we know, it is the fever or pain, the LFT improving trend suddenly become deranged, and the persistent drain is being have a bilious content. So for the diagnosis, ultrasound is a common bedside procedure which helps only in detecting the collection. So presence of bilious drain along with suspicion can make you suspect in this asset. CT can be helpful, but perioperatively more important is the bleed versus collections. So one is the color of a drain, and it is the density of the fluid. If it is 25 hospital or less, it is unlikely to be bleed, it is mostly a bile. Then MRCP is helpful in identifying the source. It can able to help in finding the communication between the leak and the duct, and it can give an idea about the biliary ductal injury extent. And sometimes the ducts of Laska which have been source of leaking, we can able to diagnose. HIDA, it is considered less often now, but it is can be helpful when other modalities are not helpful, but you are strongly suspecting, because it can detect a very small one. And ERCP is often a diagnostic as well as therapeutic. However, it is not considered to be used for the diagnostic modality, it should be considered for the therapeutic intent. So this is a study from the Barcelona and Mayo combined clinic for the bile leak, but the scenario is little different from our center, being the cadaver transplant is 75% of the cases, and nearly 2/3 have a T-tube, which we often less preferred, and the ERCP is very often done beyond second week from 16 to 70 in median of 1 month. Mean number of ERCP is 1.8 times, and they have a 15% to have a failed procedure. And even at the very early, the beginning of the day is 16 also, they found about 1/4, 28% to have a concomitant stricture. So the bile leak sites as per the study is most common is the anastomotic site, second is the T-tube, and others being intrahepatic or the cut surface. So endotherapy, as very often we consider whether we should put a stent or give a EPT. So here is an interesting study where they have shown that if you go for the only stent placement or you put a sphincterotomy alone, here the very poor outcome is with the sphincterotomy alone group. There is high risk of having non-resolution and need of further surgery is increased. So it is better to put a stent in case of bile leak when you consider for these patients as a treatment modalities. Then another group of people has come up whether we are putting a stent versus we are going for a ENBD. See here this shows that the ENBD has shown benefit for the non-anastomotic as well. The anastomotic leak will be covered by both biliary as well as nasobiliary. If there is cut surface leak or other sites of leak, it is helped by the ENBD. Little bit of discomfort for the patients, however it is one time, it remains for 7 days to 10 days for these patients on ENBD, and they get a better results for the overall. Here we have to think that way whether we can proceed or no. It is a data from 480 ERCP, 420 ERCPs with 20 cases of ENBD. Then important is the primary surgical repair, which is most commonly not considered here, but it is center specific. Few selective cases we can consider, particularly those have been uncontrolled bile leak because of large duct dehiscence not responding to the therapies, or in presence of biliary peritonitis. However, now some centers, particularly Dr. Rela Center, they are opening for the early in the first week to go for repair, which will help both in the cost way, and because it is a early transplant period, tissue is healthy, no major inflammations, so we can do it. So it needs a debate whether we should offer this or no. So this is a clinical management algorithms we can think for the bile leak. If you are suspecting high, so you see for the cut surface, if it is more, you need a PCD drainage. If it is having anastomotic T-tube site, as we discussed, ERCP with APD, and stent placement we should prefer as per the existing data. If not able to respond, we can go with PTVD. However, nasobiliary drain we need a debate, what I have suggested here. If there is bilioma is there, then we need a PCD placement. And if ERCP is difficult, particularly when we site in that case, sometimes now because with the enteroscopy you can think of, otherwise because immediately post-transplant period surgical clips are there on steroids, it is better to avoid ERCP, can go for percutaneous drainage. And if all these modalities are failing, then surgical remains the salvage treatment. So this is a suggestion from my side, we can discuss at the end of the talk. So next common important is the biliary stricture. So 40% of biliary complications is because of the stricture. So mean diagnosis is around 2 months. Early we called is less than 1 month, late is more than 1 month, and can be broadly classified as anastomotic or non-stricture. And important here I want to highlight, when the stricture is more than 0.5 centimeter length, we should think of likely it is a non-anastomotic stricture. A stricture happens through a cascade, that is insult, that is mainly because of the technical other insults, develop edema which progress to fibrosis and becomes a clinically evident stricture. So here important is this all phases. If it is edema at the anastomotic site, they very often respond to only 1 or 2 sessions of stenting. If there is fibrosis, they need repeated procedures, And here you can try with dilatation procedures, where here it is little bit of difficult because of the duct dehiscence risk is more. And so this, hence we have to know the timing of the transplants to plan for this. So for the biliary stricture diagnosis, I have the all armamentariums. Here ultrasound is the very common modality used, but it is sensitive is very low. Hence MRCP is the most procedure, and it's must before proceeding for any intervention in a case of post-transplant suspect of a biliary intervention needs to be done. ERCP should be considered only therapeutic, not diagnostic. So here I can show this is a short segment narrowing, which we discussed less than 5 mm. It's a long segment narrowing. This is here you can see a bile duct along with a stricture, and has totally significant cut off here with a significant bile leak from the cut surface. And here you can see there is a stricture in a 2:2 ducts anastomotic sides. This is here, it is completely cut up. What are the types I am coming? So these are the various strictures you can find in the MRCP. All are own images. So when you think of a MRCP for a post-transplant, particularly in LDL, DDL setting is very clear, stricture is the lower side. So you can see various types, that is upper part is non-visualizing, they totally disrupted part, then narrowed, or it is a wide length. So this is the various types has been described as per the MRCP imagings, and each has its implication for the treatment. So a diagram representative of the MRCP stricture is very much needed to further plan out the for the interventions. Suppose this is a condition of pouch. This is the most commonly used. This is Japanese classifications. They told if it is pouch type, if pouch type it is there, then it is very difficult to go for the ERCP as a primary. Better you to go by the PTBD or think of. Here it is easier, and here again the triangular or totally disconnected with. This is important concern that it may be a single anastomosis, but post anastomotic this becomes totally separate and shows bifurcations. It is called triangular or cut-off type. So similarly, some is unbranched, fork shape, trident shapes, or multi-branched. So these are the things, it depends upon center wise. I have collected all from different classifications for the treatment decisions. All has implications whether we should consider as first ERCP, or we consider first PTBD, or as the primary PTBD, or we should go for the surgical managements depending on the duct anatomy and the timings. So when you consider strictures in a DDLT and LDLT, what are the difficulties? DDLT, it is easier to treat. Site of anastomosis is distal. Principal management will be same, and rate of success is high, 80 to 90%. And here the full covered metallic stents has coming up, which may be increasing role for DDLT group of the patients. Whereas consider the LDLT, difficult are the strictures to treat because they are very tight. Anastomosis is complex. They are often peripherally located, multiple small caliber dogs. Angulation, misalignment is very much common because of the hemiliver growth. Endotherapy is less rewarding, and success is only 58 to 76%. SEMS may be helpful, which will cover substance, but it is difficult to decide in a peripherally located and tight strictures. So when you cover the anastomotic, then we come to non-anastomotic. Non-strictures, you can see this is the anastomosis, and these are the disruption in the vascular plates at different point of sites, and the causes are we are very much know. All components can be considered, immunology, rejections, and all contributed except not the only hepatic artery vascular pathology. Other things also can contribute to develop a non-anastomotic stricture. So non-anastomotic stricture is characterized by long segment, diffusely involvement, and poor opacifications. So how we from imaging we can see, and what is the definite plan? So usually it is a single or it's multiple, length is longer, it is maybe intrahepatic, sectoral or segmental branches. Their causes, it is multiform. Endotherapy is less rewarding because we are not able to achieve a completely drainage systems, and is very difficult to treat, and the presentation is often comes as the late after 3rd month, and in fact the non-anastomotic strictures present as cholangial abscess, fever, or itching rather than the biliary complications as we see in the preliminary part. Then incidence is relatively less of all biliary complications, it constitutes 7 to 20%. Important here comes a ischemic type biliary lesion. What is that? About 50% of non-anastomotic strictures we found may not have a head or may not have a has, but their physiology, pathology, imaging is nearly matching the non-anastomotic structure variants. Hence, is called as ischemic type biliary lesions, and have been seen mostly on the donor side ducts. It is incidence is now has been reported more because it is an unknown entity before, because it is the ischemic type biliary lesions, but there is no hat or has. Why it happened? Hence has come up. It considered that it can be donor age, incompatibility, technical circumstances, all related to injuries, and important components coming with the bile salt toxicity. I am not able to go detail through this, but this is an interesting concept. The bile salt toxicity is causing the biliary injuries, and there is definitely some component of poor circulation oxygen supply to the biliary tracts, and it is when considered as extrahepatic, intrahepatic, or combined. So there is only recent study was shown the grading to be done on the basis of three components: hilar injury, intrahepatic injury, or bilirubin level. So these are the points. If it is there, then it's graded as mild, moderate, or severe depending on the calculus scores from 1 to 9. So this is the representative image, which very often we have seen also, but we never thought of that. Even also I am not aware of this concept, but we see very often this long segment strictures in a case of live donor setting also in absence of fat. So these are the cases. So these are the mild, this is the moderate group, and this is very severe and destructive cholangiopathy. What we are calling destructive cholangiopathy, sometimes it may be this component of ITBL which is needs to be explored. So how to manage this type of patients, because we don't know the pathophysiology. You can consider the biliary drainage if feasible in mild and moderate cases. Along with experimental therapy has been tried. Stent once put this patient is very difficult. We have 3 to 4 patients where the biliary stricture has been resolved, but the duct is totally pliable and fragile, where we needed long segment stent. These patients often landed in cholestasis, hepatic necrosis, and liver failure. We have seen couple of patients also. The treatment you can consider ERCP stenting, radiological interventions, and retransplant, and experimental therapies has been given by the MSc, umbilical cord MSCs, to the patients, and multi-drug combined regimen. It is used few cases of streptokinase, epiprostenol, thiazolidines, NAG, hemin. So this is addressing all ischemic, biliary, all combined treatment has been given, and results is poor. So this is, we have seen a biliary stricture in nutshell, and what we should do, it is a ballooning, and 3 months or 2 months will come later, and most often time we need a balloon dilatation. Stent should be exchanged at 3 months, but we do some variation at point to point, and success can range from 70 to 100%. So this is the Birmingham protocol, which partly we are following. In the form of that, we have to first decide what I told is duration from the transplant. If it is less than 3 months, very much dilatation is not needed. We need a drainage only, because duct edema will be there. So we only put a stent only. If it is more than 3 months, we should consider serial dilatation along with stent placements. And if we are able to fail with these procedures, then we should consider for the drainage or biliary reconstruction by the surgery. So basically it is a serial procedures. Then next comes the upcoming is the metallic stents. So metallic stent, till now what are used and what even we are using is that it should extend from the stricture to come over here into the duodenum. But because of this, there is risk of pancreatitis, risk of reflux, and they often get blocked. Whereas now has come as anti-migration stent, which is cover only the part of the stricture. This long string is here and is called as the anti-migration stent, fully covered. So this has benefits in relation to reflux, relation to pancreatitis, and relation to developing blockage. So this is a fully covered metallic stent we have used in only one patient, and also in our stent also it got migrated. So anti-migration has which remains inside with a long retrieval wires which is easier to pull through. So this is a large study where they have shown that if we put a standard conventional or anti-migration, the chance of having benefits is more with anti-migration for the benefits in relation to the stent migration. Stent migration is more. Then when you consider that overall migration rates, it is conventional is very high, 42%, 60% when compared to 8% with a conventional stents where we are using. Then if we are putting a stent, stricture resolution is better. You can see stricture resolution is better. Early endoscopy revision is less common needed. Then the migration rate is significantly less, and recurrence of stricture is also less. Hence, the anti-maximum stent is called Kafi stent is very much coming up now to be given. And then even consider plastic and fully covered stents in this group of patients, whether we should get benefits or no. Only benefit is in the stent durations and resolutions in part, but not in other parameters, overall parameters also. So when you consider SEMS, we should consider retrievable fully covered stents only. What we called as anti-maximum stents should be preferred. And in our place, we should first consider DDLT to be the earlier beginning part to be did. LDLT is difficult because of deep-seated strictures, challenges upon placement, migration is happen in 1/6, and overall shows that the no superiority over multiple plastic structures except the cost, because we have to go average 3 to 4 times along with follow-up. So quality and cost wise, the covered life metal stent may be better, but we need a head-to-head trial on this quality part. Then important now coming is the magnet to be used. So what is magnet I will cover. So this is a stricture site. You put endoscopy. So this is the probe which you put here through the stent, through the endoscopy, and then another through the pivot side. So these two stents remain close in contact and they have a opposite poles. So because of this mutual attraction by the magnets, they get a resolution over the time plus. So this is a study, 17 patients of LDLT strictures particularly is taken, and the gap is only 6 millimeters between the two magnets. So likely around 4 to 5 millimeter the stricture may be. Then it remains one time and remains around 2 months, 53 days. The stenosis resolved in all the cases. However, restenosis happened in 1 out of 17, around 7 to 8% of cases in 1 year follow-up. And this has been used in most of the cases as a compression anastomosis. Then another is we can get help from the spyglass. The spyglass is helpful in few components only. It is crucial for selecting the guide wire placement if stricture is tight. Sometimes if you are not able to diagnose the biliary cast or stones, this can be helpful. In cases is found to have biliary duct ulcers as a persistent source of cholangitis, where it is because diagnosed to be fungal infection, so you can treat. So these are the few, but because it is costly and has not shown any major rewarding benefits over this traditional ERCPs as far as success rate is concerned, even though you are able to find a duct by the cholangioscopy, the wire to pass, guide to pass depends upon the tightness of the stricture. Hence, cholangioscope has not able to achieve the primary success more than the standard ERCP, but you can get additional benefits of these two. Hence, it has not been considered to be the beneficial. You can see this very long and thin segment stricture. So this is the opening where you are able to negotiate the nail. So this is upcoming, and but is few studies only this. So what we follow our protocol wise, our protocol is periodic escalating, that is increase in number, increase in size of the stents. Plastic stent is the norm, preferably consider the straight stents. Balloon and hurricane dilatation consider if these are more than 6 months only. If less than 6 months, because the stent stricture is easily amenable, so we can consider 6 weekly. If it is more than 6 months, we increase the gap to 2 to 3 months. We consider pre-procedure to be empirical antibiotics and immunosuppression to be hold or minimized depending upon the duration of the transplant, the requirement of the previous immunosuppressions for 3 days of this period. Our procedure is preferably supine position for the ERCPs, because most Western studies are DDLT, whereas LDLT is totally difficult. It is very difficult to compare the imaging. We prefer, and stent free is considered if it is 3 to 4 number of 10 French stents has been placed, or 2 numbers of 10 French is placed able to pace, and a balloon of 20 French can be rolled easily over the stricture site. So this is considered to be the stent free protocol. So then after the endoscopy is the interventional radiology procedures. So we consider them as salvage procedure or primary procedure. Salvage is that when we are not able to negotiate the guide wires, if even after achieving a stenting, sometimes we are not able to achieve the ERCP response as desired, if this patient has cholangitis not improving with stent exchange, or they develop cholangial abscess. And the primary PTBD is considered in some cases because of long segment or suspicion of non-anastomotic strictures. The response we define as resolution of all symptoms, normalization of biochemical parameters as complete, Partial is improvement in the parameters as far as bilirubin and enzymes are considered, but not able to achieve the normal. That is called partial response. So this is one of the picture from our considering difficult access to establish a drainage. This is a few cases, despite are able to achieve the stenting through the ERCP, we are able to find cholangiolar abscesses, and by placing a PTVD, we are able to get the abscess resolution. But as you can see, there is a destructive type cholangiolar pattern here. So after successful endoscopic treatment, the recurrence rate is happened to be 18% DDLT and 1/3 in LDLT patients. So this is what we consider for the percutaneous management in a case of post-transplant. So if it is bileak or bilioma, we consider the PCD as the first line of treatment follow-up. If it is strictures and non-anastomotic, then you definitely consider the line of vascular procedures with less on ERCP and graft dysfunction. If it is there, then consider for the retransplant. If the strictures, there sometimes from the MRCP we can get a plan also. If it is long segment, tortuous stricture, stricture with sharp or acute angulations, better to prefer primary PTVD. If it is hilar stricture with ductal separation and having multiple ducts, the triangular forked approach, primary PTVD is to be offered. If it is singular two duct, it is in can be ERCP related procedures. If it is failed to across the strictures, we should consider hepaticojejunostomy. Here I can get debate from you these 2 points for the primary PTVD, but this is we published with discussion among all, but still we are open for the debate. Non-anesthetic managements, I am not going to merge because it's a difficult treatment, it's mainly supportives and drainage procedure, which are definitely non-successful in majority of the cases. And surgical management is considered as redo, conversion from duct to hepaticojejunostomy, or the retransplant. And here few studies have shown how we can minimize the risk. It is from our group. They have shown that the anastomotic duct, the knots would be outside, and by keeping outside, they are able to get a significant reduction in the complications. This is similar also from Dr. Ella's group. They are shown to consider new concept of end to side. If his multiple ducts are there, you just do a side end to side anastomosis, so that you can achieve all the ducts into the bile duct from this side and can minimize the complications. So biliary complications in a patient needs a multi-pronged approach. Hepatologists, surgeons, and radiologists at all points having critical input. If it is localized, it can be managed by the hepatologists as well as surgeons. If it is diffuse, it needs a definitely towards more transplant, but at the same time radiological approach can be considered, and hence this can combined as approach can give a good results for this. So now I am coming to the IL-based data. We have compiled around 108 cases. We have outside cases also around 14 patients who have been referred here for the biliary drainage to us. 90% are being the live donor settings. Our total ERCP session for 108 patients is 290. Mean ERCP per person is coming around 3, but however is ranged from 1 to 11 in few cases who are having cholangitis, cholangiolar abscess, or her duct has been destroyed. Mortality is 21% all cases. However, biliary related complications are 15% on the patients with the biliary complications. So as we see the data, about 55% are having stricture. By leak is present in 23, but when combined 23 and 25 is coming around 44% is to be having leak with strictures, and we get only one case of ampullary stenosis and 2 cases of having CBD duct stones. We are able to cover 70% success rate with alone ERCP, and ERCP failure is happened in around 13% cases which require the PTVD and salvage procedures, whereas primary PTVD has been done in 11% of the cases. Hepaticojejunostomy we have found in 5 patients, and only PCD for the bileak has helpful in 2 cases. And important to highlight that around 10%, 11 cases diagnosed to having biliary stricture, has a stricture visible, deranged LFT, even with the jaundice, but they are able to improve without interventions. Here we have little bit done modification in the steroid predominant regimens, which causes inflammation, resolution, and stricture. So we have to see the patient profile, duct anatomy, where we can give a trial of having immunosuppression modulation for the biliary drainage to be achieved. So total ERCP sessions are 290. Cholangitis happened in 8% of cases, pancreatitis only 1 case, renal perforation in 1 case, hemophilia in 1 case, and Important part in our case is that restenosis happened only in 2.6% in comparison to 15% in the established literatures. So to summarize my talk, the biliary complex management, it needs a three-pronged approach. ERCP, its MRCP is must before the procedure. Duct anatomy and timing of LT is crucial for making decisions. ERCP with upgraded stenting with help of balloon should be considered. SEMS is considered for the radiality only and preferably should be anti-migration one. Important is the coming up is the ITBL, estimated biliary lesion, should be needed to study it in our center. PTBD as a salvage procedure followed by Rendova is our practice. Primary PTBD needs debate but is selected from case to case, particularly those having lung stricture, angulation, multiple ducts, or in suspicion non-strictures. They should be considered for the radiological interventions. Surgery primary intervention can be considered but need debate for the early bile leak, but it is often a salvage procedure. Thank you.